Do you feel you've come into the lion's den here? Do you feel you'll be...
I feel it's a huge privilege to be invited. I look forward to the discussion, look forward to the questions. It's an important one.
Oil in general and BP in particular have had a hard few years of it. Do you feel you're slightly getting over the problems? I mean, in particular, of course, BP with the spill in the Gulf of Mexico and so on, that one must have taken up almost all your time over the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, that was a terrible disaster, and 11 people died. 11 people didn't come home that night, and you cannot run a company where people cannot come home after a day of work. So, but we, from the beginning, we were crystal clear. We would, regardless of how it happened and what the causes were, we were going to step up. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to clean it up. We were going to compensate those people that had their losses, and we're going to stand up for what we had done. And as a matter of fact, we have now just recently, only a few months ago, we made the big settlement with the American government, with the Gulf states, with the 550 cities, communities. So it is largely behind us, and we can now go on and deal with the 50% lower oil prices.
It's probably a bigger problem. There'll be a lot of people here, though, still, who feel that big oil companies are the enemy. They're what holds the world back from being a better place. How do you answer that?
Well, it is actually a discussion that I had also with myself when I took on this job, because before I did this, I was the CEO of Ericsson, and before that for another company. So I think if we have to first understand that if we didn't have had access to fossil fuel and energy, we would have still been living on the living standards of the 1600s. So access to energy is what has brought us here. We have in this world now come to a stage where if you look at United States, has already flattened out their energy need, and with more renewables, fossil fuel is coming down. If you look at Europe, it's an even sharper curve. And if you look at oil consumption in Europe, we expect it by 2035 to be back to the level of 1965. The whole challenge is obviously that we have billions of people in emerging markets. China is the big example, that are trying to reach the standard of living where we see in the mature markets, and that's a legitimate strive. It has to happen. And with all that, we have to find a better way forward, and we have to find and develop renewable energies and get to a greener society. And we didn't, there is an old expression that some of you probably have heard, but we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stone. We found better ways of doing it. And it's the same way here. You can't forbid the fossil fuels that fuels this world. And so when I joined, I felt I want to be part of this energy challenge for this world and find also a way forward, not just see the company end its life when fossil fuel is over, but find the way forward.
It must be, though, a temptation to wish that things would just continue as they are. I mean, it sounds almost as though you think that the rightful passage forward of BP is to get out of the oil business.
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's the fact is that everybody understands that fossil fuel is an ending resource anyway. So you can only go on for so long, even if you burned it all or burnt everything that you could actually find. Eventually, we have to find a different path forward for any company. And I think it's more important for companies like BP to embrace change. And some of you may remember, or still well remember, that we talked about Beyond Petroleum. And that was because we recognized the need to fuel the world in a more sustainable way. We argued very hard 15 years back, and have since, for a price on carbon. so that you could put call it a penalty on fossil fuel and put greener energies at more advantage. That haven't still materialized, and we still argue for it ahead of the Paris meeting. And I actually think it might very well happen this time.
But BP is going to be in business for the foreseeable future and into the unforeseeable future.
No, absolutely, and we have to also recognize that even if you take the most extreme, but the wished 450 scenario for 2050 to limit the temperature increases to 2 degrees, even there, dominating fuel is fossil fuel. So fossil fuel is not going to go away. But at the same time, there is no fuel that is, no energy form that is growing faster than renewables. It is growing 6-7% per year. If I was a young businessman, I would love to be in that business. The problem is that the amount of energy that the world needs is so large, so it still doesn't make a huge difference. It's still, today it's about 3% of all energy in the world, and in 20 years' time we assume it's going to be 7-8%. So it's not a game changer yet, but it's growing fast, and it will have the time will come.
Now, somebody told me, I don't know whether they added it all up and divided by the number of delegates, but somebody said to me that the median age here, the average age here was 23. Now, when the 23-year-olds are 53-year-olds, will they still be driving cars fueled by oil in some form?
Probably yes, but it is very interesting with electric cars. I think many of us have assumed that it'll take a while for electric cars to actually develop in a meaningful way, because if we use an electric car but buy the electricity and that is generated by coal, we are in a much worse place than if we use a combustion engine. So we have assumed that as long as we don't have enough renewable production of electricity, it doesn't really help us. But what happens now is that I think we will see, like China and India and such countries, they will be very tough on pushing for electric cars, even if they have still that dilemma, because there's just so much cars. So you in Beijing and Shanghai and Guangdong and wherever you are, so you want to be able to clean the cities. And therefore we get the scale, and therefore the development will be even faster.
Will China continue to be a major, possibly the major users of oil into the future?
That is really the challenge for the world. If we look at those curves that I talked about, US sort of starting to flatten out and go down, and Europe already coming down, China coming from a low position, by 2035, China alone will be bigger than the whole of US and Europe, and going straight up, whereas we're going down. So that is where the challenge lies. And in fact, it's obviously oil for their transportation, but the big deal is for their power generation, where they use coal, because they have lots of coal, and they have little of gas and oil, so they're stuck with their coal. But I just came from Guangdong. I've been there a couple of days in the advisory board for the governor, but there's nowhere in the world where there's such an intense focus on renewables, because their problem is so big. You cannot land in Beijing today on a sunny day without the instruments, because you don't see. So I mean, there's nowhere. They have in Guangdong opened a few years ago an institute for renewable research, and they have 180 PhDs in that institute.
How many do you have
Well, we have many in BP, but if we think about, they beat us by miles when it comes to renewables, and we still spend $1 billion a year on renewables.
But supposing something happened to China politically, as well as economically, where would BP be? Where would the oil industry be? Where would the rest of us be?
Well, a way of looking at that is that a lot of people ask me about the oil price. And we have just seen an oil price come down 60% over the last year or so. The fact is that we've gone through a period of 4 or 5 years of actually stable oil prices around 100. But that is not the norm. The norm is volatility. We have seen 6 times in the last 30 years where the oil price have dropped more than 50% over half a year. So that is typically what happens. And every such event is because of a geopolitical crisis, where the price either shoots up or shoots down. So when you speculate where the oil price is going, you look at supply and demand curves and you say it should be in balance about that time and so on. But the fact of the matter is that Libya's breakdown or Iraqi war or now the deal in Iran, which opens up for oil production in Iran, all those things matters an awful lot. And you know probably even better than I where the world is going. Nobody can guess.
Tell me what your guess is about the oil price. I mean, it's well below $50.
Yeah, we actually never spend time on understanding the oil price for the near future because you almost cannot do it. But the fact is that the present level, $45, the oil price is actually so low, so there is hardly any new exploration going on, which means that we will run dry sooner or later, and then we will have a price shock the other way. So you would actually hope that you would have a stable pickup. But we think it's going to be, we have talked a lot about what we call lower for longer. We think it's actually going to stay this long because it's an oversupply in the world. American shale oil has come to the market. Iraq is producing more. Now Iran comes with more. And the demand increase with about 1 million barrels a day per year. It's going to take a while before it gets back in balance.
A while being how long?
Yeah, how long is a string? We think it's going to be several years. I mean, we have talked about 2018. In theory, it could be earlier than that. But there is so much also extra inventories in the world that needs to sort of come down because that's where you put the extra supply. You put them in. Now you put it in tank ships and terminals and big holes in mountains and things where you store it.
It's hard, I think many people would find, to have too much sympathy with the big oil companies. On the other hand, it must be hugely difficult to run a vast company like BP when you simply don't know what the oil price is going to be in 6 months' time.
No, that is true. But at the same time, we spend very little time on that. But we spend a lot of time understanding where does the oil price need to be in balance to find enough new. And that probably needs to increase $30 or something to, I don't know, $70, $80 before you're back in balance. But it's equally, it's also difficult. We have to understand and read the geopolitical situation in the world because it would be better if all the places we found oil were peaceful places, but they are in Iraq, Egypt, Libya, Azerbaijan, Russia, many such places where everything is not a given. So
Russia, you've had particular problems with, of course.
Yeah, Russia has obviously is somewhere together with the U.S. and basically U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Russia are on par being the biggest oil producers in the world. So Russia is an oil-producing nation, oil and gas-producing nation with one of the biggest reserves in the world. So this is what fuels Russia, and they are obviously struggling at this oil price.
And they don't like BP.
Well, they do like us. We are 20% owners in their largest oil company. So, no, we are fine there.
You're okay?
Yeah, we're okay.
But it just must be a real kind of white-knuckle business to be in. I mean, okay, fine, I'm in a white-knuckle business, but then you expect journalism to be, but you don't expect a huge corporation with immense investment and immense numbers of highly qualified people to be quite so difficult to forecast.
It's a complex business. I just said when we sat and had a little lunch here before that the three last CFOs that have spent the last 25 years with BP, 3 generational CFOs, they're all PhDs in mathematics. It's a complex thing to understand all those things, but we also spoke about the fact that I was CEO for Ericsson for 7 years before that. And that's a very, very complex business, but in a completely different way. Enormous new 20% of the company's spending was just R&D, bringing out new generations of technology and take bets on technologies where the consumers don't even know it's going to come. And a huge volatility up and down. I think there are big risks in the oil industry, but there is also stability. We talk about maybe 90 million barrels of oil production every year. Could be 91 or 90.5 or something. It's another drama in other industries as well. So.
I'm going to ask you a little bit later in this session about your ideas and thoughts about leadership. So I won't get into that now. I'll leave that till the end of our session. But can I ask you one last kind of ethical question? Do you feel hand on heart that the big oil business is something that you can do with a clear and clean conscience?
Well, I absolutely think you can do it with a clean conscience because energy is what drives this world. And we have to provide energy for the world. So I don't have a problem with the fact that that's the role we take on. We are the reason for all the prosperity and standard of living that we have created. But the fact is we're growing so far, so we neither can supply with the amount of energy that is needed in a couple of generations. That isn't enough. We have to find new forms of energy. And that's incredibly exciting to be part of that challenge as well. What is important to understand, and we talked about it, is that at least I think that's something you should know as ambassadors in the world, but of the total oil and gas production of the world, the oil majors, we and Exxon and Chevron and Shell and Total, we are 8% of the total production.
8%?
92% of that production is from all these local oil companies in the countries that has the oil, Saudi Aramco, or Petrobras in Brazil, or Rosneft and Gazprom in Russia, and so on, Statoil in Norway. So we are a small part, but we play an important part in technology development.
You get a lot of the blame, too.
We get a lot of the blame, yes.
Now, we were going to have some questions from the audience. Is that going to...
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. So, you know the gig, we've got the podium. We have Janina Kuhagen from Germany. We have Gareth Perks from the UK. And Donald Bambara from Burkina Faso. There are 3 questions. And then
if there's
we will
time,
also
we'll
take
go to the open floor.
Open floor questions for those of you who may have a question you would like to ask. If we have time, we'll get to those as well.
Hi. Oh, it's a bit loud.
Where are we for? Yeah, okay. Okay, Gareth, we'll go to you first.
Thanks. We've seen some really inspirational leaders over the last few days speak about some of the important decisions that they've had to make on their journey so far. So my question to you is, what are the most important decisions that you make as a leader of your organization?
Well, I think if I look back at my Ericsson years, I came in the middle of that crisis where we we were 110,000 people at the peak when the telecom bubble bursted in 1999, 2000. And we had to cut back 60% of the work staff. We cut from 110,000 people to 47,000 people. That is a very tough task to do. It's tough decisions, knowing how deep you have to cut, send people home that have spent their career with Ericsson. We came out of it stronger than our competitors because we also took very tough measures. And I remember a mail from one of the employees when we made profit for the first time in Q4 in 2003 that said, "I've always taken off my badge over the last years when I have left the office and gone through the subway home. Today I kept my badge on the whole way." And I think I think in those days And it was the same thing with BP in the crisis we had. You can go through a lot of pain, and you can go through a lot of hard decisions as a company and as an employee if you only understand why you're doing it, you understand the rationale. So I think those things, to make sure that you bring people along on your journey, is incredibly important. If I would give one more aspect of it, is also that we have a saying in business leadership that culture beats strategy. You have to make sure that the changes that you want to drive has a supporting culture, because otherwise you can kick yourself tired, but you're not going to get the company unless the culture comes along. So you have to have a good judgment of that.
Thanks.
Second question comes from Donald from Burkina Faso.
Yes. Thank you. With the climate goals, how are you, a business leader, going to manage your business interests with the climate goals and the society, the energy world? I mean, like, your interest is to make money, and now I believe you have so many pressures on you from your board and also from the society. So how are you going to do? Thank you.
Now if you think about a company, we have a role to play in society, but we also have owners, and those owners are typically our pensioners that have saved money through their life in pensions. So we have to make sure that what we do both is the right thing to do, but makes business sense, has a rationale. That doesn't mean that everything has to be profitable in every given moment. We have to make sure that we have a viable strategy for the long run, and therefore we have to invest in areas which will make us long-term successful. That means for ourselves to both invest in fossil fuel, of course, and new technologies for cleaner fuel, but also in renewables. Then we can, in the context of the climate challenge, we can play our part. We can play the part where we do what plays to our strength, our core abilities. Other companies, be it Siemens, ABB, can develop technologies also in areas where they are strong. Young entrepreneurs play their role. And society has then to think about, does this bring us to where we need to be? And if it doesn't, and we've come a long way through these COP meetings and now Paris, you have to introduce policy frameworks, incentives, subsidies and things to actually accelerate the development in the right way. So I think we have a role to play, and it's always a continuous battle.
Janina.
Thank you.
Janina Kuhagen from Germany.
Thank you. So I was wondering about the Deepwater Horizon and events like that. Do they affect the whole industry similarly, or do consumers differentiate between the big players? And on the other side, considering the ever-growing demand for fossil fuels in the developing world, do you think this demand can actually be met by cleaner energy sources? And are we doing enough to make these alternatives affordable?
Well, clearly an accident like the Deepwater Horizon is a terrible accident, and that I think it spills on BP, it spills on the industry. At the same time, I think we can see that if we look at our brand recognition and our polls, how we are perceived by the public, we're back well where we were before the accident. And I think it's when you do something wrong in life, goes for anything, it's how you also deal with that situation that is very important. And I think we have done everything we can to deal with it in the right way. To go to your second question, we will have to develop greener energy, both for the climate reason, but also for the amount of energy that is needed. China in 20 years will consume 50% more energy than America and EU does together. If you just look at China and India's growth, which one would typically project as, say, 5.5% per year, if that instead was 4% per year, the difference after 20 years is the entire consumption of EU. So the challenge is there. I think, though, if you look at where we were at COP15, with 25 countries making pledges, scientists saying that would get us to a 5-degree increase. Today, 144, as of today, I think, have made pledges to Paris, and 110 of them are very concrete, measurable. If that can be executed, we're now at 2.7 to 3.5 degrees somewhere, so that is we're 50 to 75% of the way. And we are getting there. We still need to do more, but we are getting there. Renewable energy, as I said, is growing from probably today 3% to maybe 8% in 20 years' time. But another 20 years out, they will be, I think, a large part, if not the whole growth part. So there's a lot of opportunity here, just takes a bit of time.
So it sounds as though you're moderately optimistic about being able to do something to at least hold climate change, if not actually reverse it.
I am quite optimistic, actually, that at the end, all the pledges and everything needs to be implemented. But the fact is, we cannot get there without technology development and business development. That is what's going to eventually solve it, and driven by those pledges. But I think I'm optimistic that it'll happen.
Do we have a question from Charlie? The light's gone off.
Light on.
There we go. Hello.
Hello, Carl. Thank you very much for care about Chinese froggy situation. So this is a question from Chinese engineer. So everyone here is talking about leadership, climate change, and expectations on the coming days, COP21. So China, as one of the biggest manufacturing countries, I think everyone in the world is expecting China to promise more and make it as soon as possible. The same, including myself, I'm winning like this. But on the other hand, when we are expecting or we see requesting for sustainability, just as the beginning, the professor Muhammad Yunus said, why not we don't think from ourselves, from our heart? When the big company like you transfer their manufacturing factories to developing countries, why you do not set a target to sharing some methodology or technology to your local suppliers, where the most of the pollution comes from? Is it because it will decrease your profit, your income, or because the consultant fee is too high? Because I know there is lots of people from Siemens and from General Electric, they are working on this kind of category. So finally, my question to you, sorry, Mr. Carl, not particularly to you, but your company as well. Does BP had any planning to do something on this one? Because by the way, we hate the haze very, very much, and we must do something, and we need your help.
You are right that it doesn't help in any way that we move a factory from one place to the other. The activity still happens. So that's not the thing. The real driver for the pollution in emerging markets is not the fact that we moved some production. It is the fact that there are billions of people that try to reach the standard of living that the 300 million in US and the 500 million in Europe are enjoying. And that's a legitimate strive. That has to happen. There are 1 billion people in the world that don't have access to electricity. All of these things are are happening and should be happening. And of course, then when you in particular look at China, that has to satisfy its energy need by burning coal. That's why you have the pollution. And of course, that is what we had. It's not, some of us are old enough, but not too many in this room, but old enough to remember the smog in London. We remember the smog in Los Angeles. It all happened, and it can be solved. We solved it there, and it will be solved again. And at least I think today, when I was in Guangdong and I said to the governor and the party secretary, don't now look at your pollution problem only as a problem that you have to solve. Look at it as also an opportunity to become world leaders in green energy, because no one is more motivated than you are. And I think we will see a lot happening. I'm actually it's a little bit like the Chinese expression, let 1,000 flowers bloom. But if you look at what goes on in the world, there's so much activities, initiatives, technical development, research going on. So I think we will, including in emerging countries like China, I think we should see better times ahead. But we have put ourselves in the world in a difficult spot, and we need to work ourselves out of it.
I think one of the things that I find really interesting is that China, which often has been portrayed as the big enemy in all of these different spheres, actually has a great desire to be on the right side of the ledger, doesn't it? I mean, feels deeply uncomfortable with the allegations and accusations made.
Yeah, and I think actually, as you rightfully say about the smog in Beijing or Shanghai or wherever you look, the political leadership, it's so obvious when you are in China about the smog problem, so you can't deny it. Some of our problem in the Western world, we don't see the CO2. We can measure the temperature increase, but we don't see it. But it's so visible, the problem in China. So I think actually that the Chinese leadership are very, very serious about it.
Now, I promised earlier that we'd talk a little bit about leadership. And maybe I ought to start off by asking you, how did you arrive at the position you're in now? How did you start off? What did you study at university?
Well, I think actually, let me just first say about leadership, because I think we have to first define what leadership is. And I think leadership, to me, you can be a manager that manages things. You can organize, and you can delegate, and you can follow up and do those things. But leadership, to me, is when you take your company, you take people to a place where you haven't been before, and neither you or the company. And for that, you have to be able to touch people's hearts and minds with a vision, what you want to accomplish. And that's something you can only grow together. And from there, generate the energy from everyone to feel pride, to feel passion, to have the courage to go to new places. And I think this is really what leadership is to me. And I think it takes actually two things. I think it takes, first of all, a deep interest in people. Because it doesn't matter if you're an oil company or a telecoms company or you're head of a university, whatever, it's just people. It's all about helping people to be the best they can be. And I think that's the one side of it. The other side is you'll never come to a new place without driving change. You have to embrace change. You have to dare to actually do things differently than you did before. That's what leadership is about. And I think there are two things that actually have at least been very important to me. I was born north of the Arctic Circle in Sweden. If you go to the 70 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, if you fly to Stockholm, you drive your car and you drive until the road ends, you come to Porteous, my hometown, 119 people. And my father and mother, they worked for the Swedish State Power Board building hydropower stations. My father was an accountant. So we moved every year, every second year, and I went to new schools all the time. And I love the change. Some kids probably hate it, but I think I grew from it, and I can still feel a bit of thrill when you see the moving boxes come up and you move to, there's something new coming up. I think that taught me that I'm not nervous for change. I've always loved that part. So I think that of embracing change. I always love to work with people. When I was in school, I wanted to be a high school teacher in math and physics, and then
that was your subject, math?
Yeah, math and physics. And then I ended up doing a Master of Science in Physics, and I ended up starting with a company, ABB, actually, and one thing led to the other. But it's been there all the time. I've always loved to do something together with people and accomplish something great.
But, I mean, I can understand that with a small company, but you've got this vast international company,
Yeah.
BP, leaving aside Volvo trucks and your other concerns. But with BP, you can't really take it somewhere new, can you? Surely you've just got to carry on in the same direction as it's going.
Oh, no. You cannot carry on. It doesn't work. I mean, let's go back to Ericsson, because that's a better example, because BP has gone through its very difficult times. BP will have to go to a different place, or like we say at times, we can become a dinosaur that disappears with our time. But companies need to renew themselves all the time. If I look at Ericsson with everything they've gone through, it's completely it's been there since 1876, but it's completely living off mobile telephony today, which hardly existed in 1990. You reinvent yourselves every 5-10 years, and that's why any company today, I think the lifetime of large companies today are actually so much shorter, 15-20 years, and a lot of them are gone and others have come again. That used to be 50-70 years if you go back 50 years. So standing still is not going to work.
And you're not standing still, and BP's not standing still.
No, we're not standing still. We have certainly not stood still the last 5 years. It's been incredibly eventful years. But it's been a tragedy, as I said, but also when you come under such enormous pressure, that's when you actually do things in a way that you would otherwise maybe not do, because the alternative is not to not do anything.
Carl-Henric, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So thank you, John. Thank you, Carl-Henric. Big round of applause.
Thank you.